Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of the People Progressing podcast. And today I have one of my closest friends in the world, and I'm really excited to have him on, Dean Adams. He was a Hall of Fame coach football, coach baseball. We coached against each other, coached with each other. One of my mentors. I can't say enough about the guy. Just excited to have you on, Dean. And what I always ask my people that come on my podcast first is where you grew up, what you like to do as a kid, some of the things that was fun for you to do, some of the things that influenced you, and so forth.
I appreciate it, Joel. It's a pleasure being here, getting a chance to talk to you, and some of the, I guess, things that influenced me. What I like to do is I was a sports guy, probably just like you, Joe. You and I are so much alike in terms of our upbringing. Your father was a teacher and a coach, same with my father, and so that had a huge influence on me. I mean, growing up, he was the head football coach at Hinckley, and I can remember vividly being, 7 years old and going down in the basement and watching film on the old, is it a 9 millimeter thing, and,
Yeah.
and, and watching film with him and not knowing anything, but listening to him talk about how good kids are and so on. And then probably like you as well, Joe, going out and not only watching him coach, but he also was the scorekeeper and time clock runner for wrestling. So he dragged me along to wrestling and then to basketball games. And so really drove me into knowing I wanted to be an athlete. Went to Gateway High School. My dad was at Hinckley for 33 years, opened the school and then retired from the school. But I can remember vividly, it was back in the day when we lived in a boundary to where I could choose either Hinckley or Gateway, and Dad hit me up to go to Hinckley. And I looking back on it, I wish I would have. You always have those things, but just to be around Dad. But at the time, I'm like, I was raised with, probably like you were, Dad's coaching buddies, and I thought, my gosh, if I go to school at Hinckley, I'm going to be watched like a hawk, And so I went to Gateway, played football and baseball, and I went when I went to college. It was really interesting, Joe, that Dad mentioned to me, and I'll never forget this. I was getting ready to graduate. I had one quarter left. Greeley was on the quarter system at the
Yeah.
time, and I was going into my last quarter. And I'll never forget. Dad called me, and you know how dads are. They know a hell of a lot more than you do, but called me up and he says, "Hey, what do you think about just staying in there and getting your teaching certificate?" And at that time, I was so ready to get out of school, and like a lot of young kids, think I'm going to go out and land $100,000 a year job and become a millionaire. And I told him, "You're crazy." And I got out, and my wife and I, Marla, we got married and had our son Preston, and so I went to work, and I think I was out of school for not even a year, and I went back in to get my teaching certificate. Was We talked just before we started this conversation about, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I mean, what I ended up doing for a living was my calling, and I've listened to your podcast, and obviously our friendship. I've learned so much from you in terms of having a purpose in life and wanting to touch people, and so I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. And I just, before Dad passed, I remember telling him, going, "I wish I would. It would have saved me a year and a half."
Yeah. Yeah. I
Going the
know.
long way to do it, and it's one of those times, though. But so yeah, Mom and Dad were a huge influence on me, and I'm sure, and I know you well enough, that the influence that Willie and your mother's had on your life with regards to what you do for a living, and where we're at now, and the kids we've had a chance to impact. There's not very many people that can say that. As we get older, we look back on it, and we impacted a lot of kids in a good way. And I'm sure there's some kids out there that are think, at least for me, that, man, he's a butthead. But
No, I hear you. I hear you.
but it's been fun. It's been fun. So
Yeah. And so when you said, back in the day when you were going to come out of college and have a business degree and go work and do all that stuff and make all that money and everything else, what was it that made you sit back and go, this isn't for me? I mean, was there a certain incident? I know for me, it was kind of an incident that happened to me that made me go back and get my teaching license and do what I did, just like you. I mean, our stories mirror each other.
They do.
It's amazing.
Very much so.
But what was it for you, Dean, that gave you the courage to give up whatever job you were working in and go back to school and do something you thought that might be more of your purpose and passion?
I was fortunate enough, Marla, my wife, she's an elementary school teacher. And, I was working at United Airlines. I was working in the lost bag department, which they have a central office here in Denver. And well, at the time they did. Now it's in Chicago. But my job was to go to work at 4 o'clock till 12:30 at night and to handle people from around the world, basically in the United States. So that lost a bag, whether it be in Honolulu, they would call me, or they lost a bag in St. Louis, and we were the central hub. And I remember vividly one night there was a guy that was not happy with me, wasn't happy with United Airlines, and he used some language that I occasionally use. And it was that night that I went home to Marla and I said, I can't continue to do this for a living. And so what I did, Joe, and a lot of people don't know this, is I continued to work at United from 4 to 12:30, and then I'd wake up at 6 or 7, and I would go to school down at Metro, take my classes, what I need to do, and then I had it set up to where obviously I made it in time to go to United Airlines, by 4 to 12:30, and so I did that for a year and a half. I even did that, throughout the whole year of classes, and then that semester of the student teaching. I was teaching and then getting in the car and driving straight to United Airlines. And at the same time, if you can believe this, Joe, and I know you've had, with your kids, our son Preston, our firstborn, during that process, was in the hospital for a month, because he had something with his stomach lining. I won't bore you with that, but so that was a very trying time for Marla and I both, because she was working. We were wanting to be with our kid. I was trying to go to school. In betwixt all that, trying to go down, obviously, and spend as much time as I could with my baby. So that was to put it mildly, that was a very challenging time, and a very, but you know what you do, Joe? You do what you do. You grind. You just, and I think that was taught to you and I both by our parents of, hey, when it gets tough, you get tougher. And I think that's part of what we're going to talk about today is sometimes when things get tough, sometimes you got to get a little bit tougher. And, so, but that was the moment. To answer your question, long story, sorry, but that to answer your question, it was that night that guy sat there for, a good 10 or 15 minutes saying things that I thought, man, I got to do something else. And what a godsend it was, though, to realize that and go through that. And looking back on it, it's just one of those challenges in life.
Yeah, and I say it all the time because I talk about this a lot on my podcast. That 70% of Americans are disengaged at work, and you and I were one of them at one point.
Yep.
But we did something about it. There's too many people that are just sitting there thinking, what should I do? Or should I do something? Or could I do this? Or could I do that? And I think we're both examples of somebody that said, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah.
I gave up a company car. Yeah. I had a good job, company car, good benefits, everything else. They offered me a promotion, a raise. I gave my car keys back and said, I'm going back to school. And the first day I went to class in those classes, I was like, okay, this is it. This is
what you want to do.
Yeah. And but you got to, that's the reason I asked, is because sometimes people need to hear someone else's story to push them into, doing that and getting into their purpose and passion. coaching and go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I've always said to people, if you don't like what you're doing, do something about it.
Right.
To your point of what you just said, I've always said, if you make your own happiness, number one, you make your own happiness. And if you're not happy, then decide what is it that's going to make me happy and go do it.
Yeah.
You might go through some rocky roads. You might go through some sleepless nights, or where you're getting 5 hours of sleep at a night. But in the end, you're gonna come out on the other side going, this is making me happy.
No
What I
doubt.
decided to do. And so I struggle like you do, Joe, that of people out there, and I've said it to numerous people, and I'm sure I know you have. They're talking about being unhappy. Well, do something about it. What is that? And so it's a great way to live. And I think you would agree with that, Joe, that if something's not, making you happy, then find something that's going to.
Yeah.
So
you only get to do this once.
Yeah, exactly.
You only get to do it once.
Quick.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, I tell people all the time, sometimes you got to walk through the crap to get to the flowers. And,
great way to put it.
Most people do. And, it's, don't think that you're by yourself. 7 out of 10 people driving to work every day are pissed that they're going to work. Right. And it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
Be the 30% that does it. Yes. Let's make a dent in that. Yeah. So you got into teaching and coaching. What was that like for you, Dean? The first time you got to go into a classroom, or first time you were coaching and so forth. What was that feeling like?
It's hard to describe, Joe. I mean, you know the feeling. I felt, I don't know, I was giddy. I was excited about it, going out and being able to coach. And the nice thing for me, Joe, is I started my career at Hinckley, where my dad was still at. I had the great opportunity of working with my dad for 5 years before his retirement. And when I got it there at Hinckley, obviously I still knew all of my dad's friends who were coaches, and so I really fell into such a great opportunity getting a job there to start my career that and then the nice thing about at Hinckley at that time, Joe, is they were really good. I mean, we were really good in football. I mean, and then baseball, I got the head job there, and we were really good in baseball. And towards about 1990, I'd been there about 10 or 11 years. I lose track of time, but the last about year and a half, 2 years, I could really see a change in the clientele, a change in the demeanor around the school. And I just kind of knew, and here again, like you do, and like a lot of people do, if they don't, they should. I leaned on my dad going, man, it's changing, Dad. And he goes, oh, it is. And he goes, the best thing you could do is, try to get out of APS. And so I did. I applied all around the state, or not around the state, but in the metropolitan area, and had some opportunities. Ended up, though, getting over to Cherry Creek schools, and kind of rejuvenated me back into it, because it was a different setting in APS at that time. And so, got to go to Grandview High School and continue to do what I love to do, and that's teach and coach football and baseball. But, with all those good things being said, Joe, I kind of leading into this thing is, when you coach, most coaches, and we like to party. We win a football game, and we go out and have a couple cocktails, and that kind of steered me to really and truthfully why I guess I reached out to you to kind of shed some light on that. But anyhow.
Well, let's get into it. I know it's not easy, and this doesn't happen with coaches. It happens with every leader. I mean, in business and in sports and whatever it is. And those temptations sometimes get the best of us, or whatever it might be. But you went through some tough times. You loved what you did. You loved where you were at and everything else, but something got the best of you. And we'll talk about that. But what kind of started that, Dean? Was it just you needed to have a good time? You'd done it before. It didn't get to, you were drinking, you drank sometimes and didn't really bother you that much. And then it just kind of snowballed on you to the point where you just didn't know what to do with it, or what happened with that?
Joe, I was first and foremost, and I think people need to hear and recognize that alcoholism is a disease.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's medically proven that it's a disease, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I look at it fortunately, unfortunate, but fortunate for me, I should say, that my family has a we have some alcoholism problems in my family, and I got into it, Joe. It was around when I was growing. I mean, mom and dad, they like to have a cocktail. Neither one of them are alcoholics. I can't speak for them specifically, but um, my dad could and my mom could be social drinkers, and I was a social drinker to start out. And I want to make sure that everybody understands this because I think this happens to a lot of people. Joe, I wasn't depressed. I mean, I was married. At that time, I had two great kids. I had a great marriage. I have a beautiful wife. I love my job. I'm having great success teaching and coaching, and I was a happy person. I wasn't fighting a demon. I wasn't fighting, and I know that a lot of people believe that you drink to combat,
Yeah. Good
to
point.
to numb yourself from something that's going on in your life, and not everybody's that way. I want to make sure that that's clear because I'm a walking talking example of it, that there was nothing going on in my life that I was trying to numb.
Yeah.
I, I
Avoid.
was
Yeah.
I was having great success, and I was what happened to me, Joe, was I liked to drink. I liked the feeling. And so what became from Friday night after a game, and this went on for a few years, Joe. After a game, we'd go and us coaches would have some beer. We'd have a party at the house and drink some beer, and Saturday get up, do our thing, like with coaching, going in and watching film, and then roll around to the next Friday night and win a game. Boy, where are we partying at tonight? And but for me, Joe, it became that okay. I did it Friday. You know what? Hey, Saturday, I'm gonna have a couple of beers, and then it rolled into, well, I'm gonna have a couple of beers on Sunday, and then it rolled into, instead of beer, I rolled into vodka. And so when I went out, it wasn't beers, it was having a couple of vodka tonics. And the whole time, Joe, here again, I'm happy. Things are going great. Um, but I just started liking the feeling.
Yeah.
And um, I can't tell you specifically, Joe. I know when it happened. I know when I got in some trouble. It was about 4 years into my career. A buddy of mine, one of my best buddies, and I started a remodeling business. And I was down in the basement of a friend of ours. We were remodeling the basement, and we finished up. And I told my buddy, hey, let's celebrate a little bit. And went and bought some vodka, and we had a few cocktails down there. And I'm driving home to back to the wife and kid, and I get pulled over. I get a DUI, and I'm probably maybe late 20s. At that time, when you get your first DUI, you pay a fine, um, and that's about it. You don't lose your license; you lose it for, I think, a month. It's not a real heavy fine. I don't know what it is now. I don't ever want to find out again. At that time, that's when my wife said to me, maybe you have a problem. And, um, I didn't think so. Because here again, life was good. Um, got the wife telling me, hey, you need to slow down, quit doing it so much. And I guess maybe I did a little bit, Joe, but didn't learn my lesson. Still coaching at Hinckley, and we had lost the state championship. So this is the end of May in baseball. We lost to Sterling in 1995, and that night I went out with a buddy and had a little bit too much to drink. And what happens, Joe, is your body, just like anything, your body gets acclimated, whether it be, I don't know anything about heroin, but if it's heroin, cocaine, marijuana, to get that high, you have to do more of it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense to
Yeah.
you. I mean, that's probably pretty common knowledge. But so I could drink a lot. I really could. And long story short, I got I got pulled over again. And what a blessing in disguise, Joe, looking back on it. One, I got pulled over. Um, Two, I was drunk and I was driving a car, and I thank God, and I legitimately thank God um, for making a change in my life, because I didn't kill somebody.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I didn't kill somebody else. And at that time, when I got arrested, I was able to make a phone call, call my wife, and sorry about this.
It's
She said, it's either me and the kids or you. I'm done. And when she threw that in my face, that I was going to lose what I loved, I right then and there I thought, I got to make a change. Sorry.
you're good. You're good.
It's you know, it's hard when someone says that to you. You
Yeah.
know,
Somebody who means everything to you.
everything,
Yeah. Right.
everything.
Yeah. That's tough. That's some
Yeah,
toughness
that's
on
tough.
her part.
But it's what I needed, and she was dead serious about it. And so at that time, Joe, I told myself, I said, I'm not going to drink anymore. So yeah, that's kind of the story, Joe, and here's the thing that one, Joe, I can continue that story. I don't know where you want me to go with this, Joe. How I quit, I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. I
Because
mean, that's
that's a
like,
big deal.
I got questions. it's,
Ask, please.
so the first question I have is when you were getting into the drinking and you were going out and going to the bar, like you said, after that game and drinking and drinking and drinking, did you just think that you were immune to alcoholism and you're immune to, I can go drive and, I'm above all this. Don't worry about me kind of thing. Was that kind of your mindset at that time?
It had to have been, Joe. I mean, all I knew was I probably was extremely cocky. Thinking like you just said that I have this under control. I can drive. I know my limitations. When I think I can drive and when I can't. Obviously, I didn't know that very well because I got pulled over twice. But um, yeah, Joe, I was loving the feeling. I was loving my life, and I thought I was invincible. I thought, man, this is a great deal. Things are great
Uh,
with me, with my family. And to be honest with you, don't get me wrong, Marla, um, she would get on me. It probably would have saved me if she could have seriously, she never said to me until that night, she had never said to me until that night, it's either me and the kids or it's you being a drunk. Take it or leave it, basically, is what, I'm leaving you. If this doesn't change, I'm done. And I don't know. I think I had to hit rock bottom like that, Joe, for me to truly realize that she was dead serious, because she hadn't said it like that. She had, just like any concerned wife or husband would do to the other partner that loves somebody, you're going to be sitting there, having those conversations with them, because you can see that it's starting to become a really important part of their life. And so, she did. Don't get me wrong, she did, but not to that extreme. But yeah, to answer your question, Joe, I don't know. I really don't. I was just loving life, and I
What,
was.
what did it take that incident, Dean, for you to finally say, I have a problem?
It did, Joe.
So
It took
nothing
my
before that led you to believe that you actually had a problem.
no, and you would think, Joe, that I would be. I'm not the smartest apple that fell off the tree ever, but you would think I would sit there and say to myself, "Man, Dean, you're drinking every night," and it became that way, Joe. Instead of weekends, it was every night. I was drinking vodka, and not a whole lot of people, even in my own family, know that. You know, so I'm kind of really spilling a lot of beans here,
Yeah.
because I I was drinking every night, and even then, even with Marta making, obviously getting upset, I was like, I don't have a problem. I mean, and believe me, I don't know how many times she said it, but do you think you have a problem? No, you kidding me? And it was at that moment, though, Joe, that when it was threatened to me to lose what I truly loved. I mean, um, that was the breaking point for me.
So I have an interesting question. I was thinking about this. How does somebody, what is your advice for somebody who think deep down they might have a problem, but they're denying it, to cut them off before the rock bottom hits, to come to themselves and say, I got a problem? Does that make any sense, that question?
It does, Joe. I will tell you that if somebody even has an inclination that they may have a drinking problem, the best advice I could give them is to reach out to somebody that probably experienced the same thing. I mean, in the back of my head, when the more Marla and the more I drank, in the back of my head, she would throw it at me and I would sit there and think about it, and every once in a while I'd say, well, maybe you do, but I didn't reach out. And fortunately for me, when I decided that night, and it's there was a lot of scary moments in that, Joe, because the second thing is that next day I had a banquet to go to. Well, I had to get out of the jail to go to my banquet. Not only that, is that because of my ticket, I had to go spend time in jail. I had to go spend a week in jail, and a lot of people don't know that either. So your first DUI is what you went through. I don't know. They may have enhanced this since, what was that, 20, 35 years, or whatever it was, 30 years ago, that you were mandated to spend a week in jail. Well, think about this. I'm in my third or fourth year of teaching. They're telling me I'm going to go spend a week in prison. I can't go to my principal and say I need a week off to go to jail. And so, fortunately for me, I was able to talk to the judge, and I was able to get it. So I went in over Christmas break. The other really fortunate thing, Joe, is that my son and daughter were of age that we could tell them Dad's going to be gone I went to a football clinic.
Yeah.
And so, that's a scary thing, Joe. And when I went into jail, that solidified for me that I'm never doing this again. And I just, that was a very humbling, not so much scary, but just so humbling a moment. I mean, I hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
I hit rock bottom to where coming out of there, I had my tail tucked between my legs, and I knew that I had to adhere to what I was saying I was going to do and quit drinking. The fortunate thing for me is at Hinckley High School, a friend of my dad's um, was an alcoholic. And the saving thing that I have was I could turn to him,
Yeah.
and he knew me from growing up. He went to Hinckley, graduated. Really, when Dad started in 1963, he graduated in 1965. So there was a short time frame in between there, and him and my dad became very good friends, like you have with a lot of your players, and they became golfing buddies. So I knew this individual extremely well, and so when he heard about it, he came to me and he said, "Hey, let's talk. Let's talk about what you're getting ready to go through, because I went through it." And it was so nice to have somebody, number one, that I knew I could trust him, and he wasn't going to say anything to anybody else. Hardly anybody knew at Hinckley High School. Obviously my close family knew, but I wasn't going around telling friends.
Yeah.
My dearest friends I was, but it wasn't one of those things you want to broadcast. And it wasn't because I was embarrassed, Joe, and I'll get into that a little bit. It was just nobody needed to know this is my battle. This is my fight. And there are certain people that I relied on and leaned on, and this individual was. And looking back on it over all these years, and starting right away when I was sober, I thought, thank God that he was in my life.
Yeah. Support.
Truly understood. It's one thing, Joe, for good people to know you're struggling and going through an addiction and wanting there to be there to support you. It's wonderful. My wife included. She doesn't drink. I mean, she'll have a cocktail once in a blue moon, and so I could talk to her, but she truly didn't understand because she didn't drink alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could talk to Joe White, for example, but Joe doesn't drink alcohol. But so it's nice to have somebody that's been down that road to talk to, because they know exactly what you're going through and what you're going to go through if you want to lick this disease.
Yeah. And that's
And
one of the
so
reasons you wanted to come on today.
it is,
Just to
Joe,
let people know that you're there.
I've never judged anybody. I will say this. I've learned a lot in all these years. One, it's a battle. It does not go away. I shared with you, Joe, just recently that I was sober for, I lose track of time, but 25, 28 years, I had not touched a drop of alcohol. I had told my wife, this is where I messed up. I wanted to be able to be a social drinker. A social drinker is someone, and you know them. You know social drinkers, Joe. There's social drinkers out there that can have a beer or two, and they're fine. There's social drinkers out there that can have a margarita, they're fine. Me, when I drink, and I have a lot of friends that can attest to this, when I drink, if you drink with Dean Adams, you were drinking to get drunk.
Yeah.
There was no social in it.
Right.
We're gonna sit and we're gonna be social, all right, but we're gonna be drunk. And there's a lot of people out there that think they don't have a problem, Joe, and they're weekend alcoholics. What that means is during the work week, they're sober. Come Friday night and Saturday, they get drunk. And I don't mean they have a couple of drinks, they get drunk. I don't want to say falling down, but in their own capacity, they get drunk. And I've learned that they're still an alcoholic.
Yeah.
They'll say, I don't have a problem because I don't. There's a connotation that to be an alcoholic, it's you drink like I did. You drink every day. Okay. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. There's so many, they're functioning alcoholics, is what they're called. They function. There are people out there that are, I was a functioning alcoholic, Joe. I could drink a whole bunch of vodka each night, get up tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd be at school working out, doing my classes, being a good teacher, going and coaching, boom, coming home, you know what I mean? And then I'd start the process all over. Well, it's not affecting my job. It's not affecting my marriage. It's not affecting my kids. So I must not be an alcoholic. Unfortunately, you are. If you're
Yeah.
like that, you are. You're an alcoholic. And the toughest part for people, Joe, is to say that word. I am an alcoholic, Joe. I am a recovering alcoholic. I am I'm not embarrassed by that, Joe. It's a disease. I am actually proud because I licked that disease. I
Yeah.
beat
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's like somebody beating cancer,
Right.
somebody defeating, a cocaine addiction. And I've always the few people that I have talked to and tried to understand where they're coming from and tried to help them in this process. The first thing that you have to do is say, I'm an addict.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to admit to yourself, I'm an addict. And when I was able to finally sit down and tell my wife and tell my mom and dad and tell this individual, I'm an alcoholic, it made things so much easier because I was able to say, I don't just have a problem. I'm a bona fide alcoholic. And if you can't, you have to be able to say that. And like I said, Joe, there's a connotation out there with people that if you don't drink, there must be something wrong with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, you want a beer? I mean, I just went up the street to a block party, and people have finally learned in my new neighborhood that I just don't drink.
Yeah.
I just say, sorry, I don't want anything to drink. Initially, way back when I was telling people outside of my group that I'm not drinking anymore, they would kind of like, oh, are you goody two shoes? Are
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's wrong with you? Right. I
Yeah.
mean, no, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm an alcoholic. So
Yeah.
I didn't go around parading that I was an alcoholic by any stretch of the imagination. But to close friends or somebody that I eventually got to know, I would share them. Hey, I'm an alcoholic. I can't do it. That being said, though, in the fight, though, Joe, to people out there, it is a battle. And so fast forward, my dad got ill with cancer at a very young age. And the year he got sick, I had already decided that I needed a break from coaching. And I remember when my dad sitting down with me and going, Dean, if you're resigning from coaching, being the head baseball coach, because of me, I'm going to be extremely mad at you. And I said, Dad, that's not it. I'm tired. I
Yeah.
was tired.
Yeah.
You know how it is, Joe.
Yeah. It wears you out.
It wears you out. All the minutia behind just going and coaching. But I was just wore out. And anyways, long story short, when Dad passed, I had a cocktail, and we toasted my father with a vodka tonic. That was my dad's favorite drink, and mine. But we toasted him, had a cocktail, had another one at the reception we had for Dad out at my mom and dad's house, and no big deal. Um, I don't know how long it was, Joe, but it wasn't much longer after that I don't know what I was doing. I couldn't tell you, but I went and bought a half pint of vodka and I shook it up into a Gatorade bottle and I drank a half pint of vodka. And I don't know, a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, I did it again. And then you can see what's coming, Joe.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I fell right back into being an alcoholic again. I had a relapse. They call that a
yeah,
relapse. I
yeah,
had a
yeah,
relapse. And Marla, being my wife, God bless her, you know, anybody out there that thinks you're fooling your significant other, your wife, or a very good friend that you're not drunk or have been drinking, you're kidding yourself because they know. And
yeah,
Marla knew. And to see myself putting her through that again, I was like, I can't do this. But it kept going, Joe. It kept going. And here again, the tears, the disappointment in my wife's face. Um, I didn't. And so my wife and I, 3 years ago, we moved into the house we're in now. And I don't know what it was, Joe. Well, I do know what it was. Christmas time came around. I was still drinking. Um, had Christmas Eve. I had a little bit to drink, not a whole lot that day. January 1, though, I don't know what made me do this, Joe, but I'm extremely proud of myself because I went out in the garage and my mom had given me a calendar for Christmas. She always gives us this calendar. I have a third car garage outside there, and I pinned it up and I said, "Today's the day. I'm done drinking." And I took one of those magic markers and I the next day I went out and I put an X through January 1. January 2 rolled around. I went out there on January 3rd. I put an X through January 2. And so every morning, Joe, I would go out there and I didn't say a word to my wife. I didn't say a word to a good friend of mine that knew I was, back in it. I didn't say a word to anybody. I just said enough. And I kept waiting. It's kind of a neat story. I kept waiting for my wife to go out to the garage and see these X's on the calendar and her to go, come in and say, "Hey, what are the X's on the calendar for?" Because I hadn't told her. So I kept Xing out days. January went by, February went by, March went by. And now I'm starting to feel really good about myself. I am because
like gaining
I,
confidence.
yeah, I am, and I'm doing this. I'm doing this on my own. I'm not, I had made up my mind. And so I was, it makes you feel good, Joe. Whatever it is in life that makes you feel proud
Yeah,
of someone else or of yourself, then you feel good about it. And I was
yeah,
feeling good about myself that, hey, I'm licking this.
yeah.
And it wasn't until, if you can believe this, it wasn't until June. I remember like it was yesterday. We were out in the garage and Marta looked up there and she goes, "Hey, why do you have, I think it was like June 7th marked off on that calendar?" And I said, "I've been waiting, what is that, 6 months for you to ask?" And so I took it down and I went back to May and April and March, all the way to January 1. She goes, "What is this?" And I said, "That's how long I've been sober."
That's a pretty awesome story.
But to see the look on my wife's face
Yeah, I
is
can
what made
imagine.
it.
Yeah,
To see the look on her face and how much that meant to her.
yeah, that's so cool.
But anyhow, so and I'm not going to. I have. Fortunately for me, and people out there that are listening to this or going to listen to this. It was when it first started out, Joe. It was a struggle every day.
Yeah,
Every day I thought about drinking. Every day when I first started. Every day. Then it became once every couple of days. Then it became once a week. Then it became once every. And here's the other scary thing for people out there, Joe, is I was used to water skiing drunk.
Wow.
I was used to playing golf drunk. I was used to doing so many things drunk that the first time I went to water ski and I didn't drink, man, that was a weird feeling.
Yeah.
The first time I played golf and I wasn't drunk, man, or had drink. I wouldn't say drunk, but I drank throughout the round. But um, it's a battle. I will tell you that since I've quit the second time, um, which was been now a year and a half, 2 years ago, I have not thought about it, but maybe two or three times. One time in particular, I took my sons. We went to Mesquite, Nevada last October, and I thought how nice it would be if I wasn't an alcoholic to have a cocktail with my two sons. So that one kind of stung.
Yeah.
That I'm an alcoholic. Gosh darn it. Why do I have to be an alcoholic? I should be able to enjoy a cocktail with my two kids and but it's
But
scary, Joe, when you talk about your kids. And I've educated them. I've told them. I mean, I finally came to grips with telling my oldest first, and then I went to my daughter when I thought she was ready, and then my youngest son. When they became of age where they could start drinking, and doing those things, I thought it was important that they understand, one, this runs in our family. And I have a friend of mine who was addicted to cocaine, and they determined he's sober now. Been sober for many, 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 many years. They determined from him that he took one snort of cocaine, and whatever that chemical is in the brain,
mhm.
right then and there, he was addicted for life, or
Yep.
until he
Yeah.
seeked help.
Yeah.
And you've heard those stories. That didn't happen to me. I didn't have a beer and go, become a drinker every day. It gradually built into where that's what I enjoyed to do. So I'm sorry to ramble on here, Joe. I'm sure you have some questions or something, but
I do,
I
but
guess what I'm trying to get across, Joe, is that go ahead. I don't. What's your
well,
question?
first I have the importance. Well, first I asked this question a long time ago, and I I really came to this conclusion. If you have a problem, if you think you might have a problem, you probably do.
Yes, sir.
If you're
Without a
asking
doubt.
if you're asking that question, do I have a drinking problem or alcohol problem? You probably
You
do.
do.
Which
Yes,
probably
sir.
leads to my second part of how important, Dean, is it for a good support system
Yeah.
through the process of overcoming it? And
You
how
know,
hard is it to ask for that support?
Joe, you hit the nail on the head. It's you as an individual, first of all, have to come to the realization exactly what you said. So I would say what you just said, Joe. If somebody's out there listening to this and it's entered their mind, do I have a drinking problem? Or I think I might have it. You do. You're absolutely right, Joe. That you can go one of two ways with that. You can be Dean Adams and wait until something tragic happens. Unfortunately, my tragedy was getting a DUI and sent to jail. Um, Unfortunately, there's people out there, we hear it all the time of wrecks that have gone on and they determine that the driver of that car was drunk. I mean, you just ruined two lives. But back to your point, Joe, that if you have a problem, you do. That's number one. Number two, you have to admit it. The toughest thing for people out there is to admit and to say, I'm an alcoholic. And the sooner you can get to that and and not be ashamed of it and realize it is a problem and you want to make a positive change in your life, it's okay to say it. There's a gazillion, millions of people out there that are alcoholics, recovering alcoholics in the process of trying to, and not just alcoholics, but addicts. Call it an addict. I'm an addict. It's a drug. Alcohol is a drug. People, it's sold, in stores. Well, marijuana is now too, but It is a drug. Alcohol is a mind-altering drug. Anything that alters your mind in the science world is considered a drug. So I'm an addict. My addiction is to alcohol. But you have to come to that point, Joe. And then the support system is just huge. It's huge. And in my opinion, once again, going back to the individual that was able to help me because he had gone through it, and he was, about my age. No, he was probably 52, 53 when I, asked him, and he came to me, and it was kind of a mutual meeting, if that makes sense. I was going to reach out to him. He knew that he should probably talk to me, and having him was huge, just huge. To know what you go through physically, Joe,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So, alcohol is made of sugar. I can't, and to this day, Joe, you know how much I love ice cream. You and I,
Yeah.
everywhere we go, we have ice cream
Yeah.
together, right?
We can do some ice cream.
We can do some damage with it. My biggest thing, Joe, and this is going to sound crazy, is when I was drinking, I didn't eat sweets. I didn't eat ice cream. I didn't eat cake, any of that. I quit drinking, bud, and I could not get enough ice cream. I would go through a half-gallon ice cream in 2 days,
Yeah.
because it was part of that addiction. Well, the neat thing for me was I was like, what's going on? Well, in talking to this guy, he goes, "Hey, what are you starting to crave now?" I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, what do you like to eat?" And I go, "Well, I'm really getting on ice cream." He goes, "Me, it was pies." He goes, "I would go to that Village Inn and buy a pie almost every other day and eat a pie." And he goes, "You know what that's from, don't you?" And I really didn't, Joe. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
he goes, "It's from the alcohol. It's made up of all sugar." And so, I have, so that support, obviously the support at home, the support I got from my mom and dad, my little core group of people that I shared that, hey, I'm going through this, to have them around was, yeah, you have to have it. You really do. And so, lucky for me, Joe, and I will say this to people out there: if you're married and you have an alcohol problem, and you admit, I have a problem, I'm an alcoholic, I want to stop this. If your partner, if your husband or wife is a drinker, that husband or wife, then, in fairness to that individual, has got to stop drinking. I shouldn't say stop drinking, Joe, but they can't have alcohol around the house. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they can't think it's okay for, so let's just say Marla, we'll use me. If Marla had been a drinker, there's no way that I could have come home saying, I'm going to quit drinking, and then seen her sit down and have a glass of wine
Right.
or a beer
Right.
or whatever. It, it would have been too tempting,
Right.
because I'm an alcoholic, I'm an
Yeah.
addict. It's
Right.
like telling a person that likes cocaine, well, oh, great, that's you're going to quit cocaine. That's fantastic. But then having cocaine in the house, and a lot of people, so your support system has to say, okay, I'm going to support you 100%. You're quitting drinking. Then if I am going to have a drink, then I am going to go, and I'm going to go meet a friend for a drink, at a bar or at their house, and I'm going to have my glass of wine and then come home, or I'm going to, have a beer and then I'm going to come home. But in terms of around the house, it's gone, it's done. And so I was very, very lucky there, Joe, that for Marla, I mean, like I said, she doesn't drink, so it was a great support with her. That she didn't have to give it up as well. You know what I mean? And there's people out there, Joe, that the husband's an alcoholic, the wife likes to drink, here and there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so why should I have to, remove the beer and the stuff I like? Well, because I'm trying to I'm trying to help you. That's why you have to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I truly am vested in our relationship and our marriage and in the love I have for you. So I have to be willing to say, okay, well, I got to change my lifestyle to help you get through this. And so it's a lot, Joe. You and I lost a good friend of ours, our son. His son passed away. And I think that's what kind of spurred me on reaching out to you, Joe, of wanting to kind of share my story because I've never went around, Joe. I've never went up. I've never judged people. People, my close group of friends
Yeah.
that I've coached with, and you and our crew and various other people. I've shared with them, hey, I don't drink. I'm an alcoholic. And they know that. But I've never looked at them and said, and I know many of them, and you do too, Joe. You have to know people out there that you're sitting there going, this person has a problem,
Mm-hmm.
and I have, but I've never went up to them and said, hey, if you ever think, I'm here to listen, I'm here to help, I'm here to talk to. I've been down that road. I can be that lean on, and when that individual passed away, knowing that he was an alcoholic and I think, and I would hope, Joe, if I knew the true severity of how bad he was drinking, that might have been an instance where I reached out, but I really didn't know it was to that extreme. And it really, really, really eats at me that not that I could have saved him, Joe, by any stretch of the imagination, but you never know, right? It's like anything, you don't know until you try it. And so that really spurred me on to how do I get my story out there, to be, if somebody wants to quit and is ready to change their life. And I will tell you, Joe, physically, mentally, I can't tell you. Well, I can tell you because for 25, 20, I hadn't had a drop of alcohol. And people out there that have drank, you know how you feel like the next morning. You feel like, you got ran over by a truck. And the impact that had on my activity with my kids, looking back on it, I feel horrendous. I'm glad I was at a young age that I realized that I had a problem and was able to make the changes so that I could experience the weekends with my kids feeling good and wanting to do stuff besides just maybe sit on a couch and have another drink to get over the hangover. There's a lot of people out there that do that. I'm one of them. I felt like crap. So what did I do? I'd have a what do they call it? A screwdriver in the morning to make me feel better again. I'd start getting drunk all over again. Um, but to know that how much better I feel mentally and physically and emotionally, and not in such a fog in my brain. And there's a lot of people out there that like that, Joe, that they do exactly what I did.
Yeah.
And anyways,
Well, Dean, this is, I do this podcast. It's called the People Progressing Podcast. And its sole purpose is to help people keep learning, growing, and progressing, to help people get through things, to push through things, to get better at things, to realize that the clock never runs out on learning and growth.
great.
And when you talk to me about coming on, this is kind of a first one of these we've done with this podcast.
Is it?
And I love it because there's so many people out there that are in the same position, that are lying to themselves or don't want to admit it or whatever. You just gave them the go ahead to get help. And my next question to you, we're getting out of time here, but my next question I have to ask is, you hadn't done a lot of work with other people with this. And this death that you were just talking about with a dear friend of ours, son died because of alcoholism. has spurred you to do this, the next step in, because you're always in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people this: when you're feeling down and out, serve someone, help
Mm-hmm.
someone. When you feel helpless, help someone else.
Right.
You're putting yourself out there right now more than you've ever put yourself out there in your life. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
this last hour, from 12 o'clock to or from 11 o'clock to 12:07 right now, is probably you've put yourself out there more than any other time in your life. And I'm just saying that because I've known you for a lot of years. I've known about it, but I didn't know about it, if that makes any sense. Where do you go from here?
Well, Joe, where do I go from here? I continue to fight the disease. I continue to be proud that I'm sober, and I am proud. And I just hope, I don't know, I guess I would hope if there is someone out there that is listening to this podcast and man, I think I might have a problem. I would love for them to contact you, Joe, in complete confidence and get my contact information in complete confidence and meet over coffee and try to help somebody. Joe, I've never done it. And you're right, Joe. I've never broadcast, even to a whole group, not a group, but more people than just my close knit friends, you included, Joe. Have I shared, and you even attested, I've never shared the full length, deal like I did today, which I may have bored some people, but I just, when that young man passed away, I thought, you know what? Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be embarrassed by it because you might be able to help somebody. And I'm not ashamed and I'm not embarrassed. I am who I am. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. And instead of being ashamed or embarrassed by that, I thought, no, if you can help somebody by sharing your story and wanting to help somebody, then share your story. And that's ultimately, Joe, that's what I would like to have happen is that um, people understand that there are people out there that are willing to listen, willing to help, understand what you're going through, give you some tools to help you with this addiction, which is terrible and rampant in the world. Um, so, like you said, Joe, I think a great way to put it is if there's someone out there listening that has said, "Do I have a drinking problem?" or "I think I do," you do. And so, it doesn't have to be Dean Adams, but get that support system. Find someone out there that you can confide in and knows the struggles and knows because if you've never experienced it, Joe, you don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just don't.
Right.
You
Yeah.
don't. But I have experienced it, and so it makes it easier, just like that gentleman was for me, that coach that was for me. It made it so much easier because we could sit there and laugh about um, some of the things, not only that we did, but how much we might have consumed. But just to have a little dialogue about it and recognize the fact of, my gosh, was I really drinking that much? And did I really, you know what I mean? And
Yeah. Yeah.
just to bounce stuff off
Yeah.
with. And,
Yeah.
and I know that he helped me so much. And it was a huge influence on me. So I thought, after hearing him passing away, I thought, because I've never done it, Joe. I have communicated to two people since I've become sober, the first time and the second time. There's been two people that have reached out to me. One was a success, and one was not. The individual was not ready to say the words, "I'm an alcoholic."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the first thing people have to come to. And that would be my conversation. Okay, you're a problem drinker. Let's go ahead and extend that to go ahead and say it, and don't be embarrassed by it. Don't be ashamed about it. You're an alcoholic,
Yeah.
and there's nothing to be embarrassed and ashamed about it by. So
Well, you've
I don't
helped a
know,
lot
Joe.
of people
I will
today.
say this.
You've
I
helped a lot of
really,
people.
really, I really, really appreciate you allowing me, because I approached you about it, Joe. This is how much that I at least wanted to get it off my chest. I'm
Yeah.
here
Yeah. It's amazing.
and I'm willing to help. And if somebody does, fantastic. If they go to someone else because they heard this, fantastic. But I sat there for, it's been for quite some time. And then when that young man passed away, it just hit me like a sledgehammer. Dean, you've gone through this. Reach out and try to get out there that there are people that are willing to help you, that are the ordinary Joes, the ordinary Deans of the world that went through the same thing. And
Yeah.
so I really appreciate you, Joe, for allowing me
Oh, it's
the
been awesome.
opportunity to do it. I really do. And you know how much I love you and our friendship. And all the things that we've been through coaching together, and our lives mirror each other so much. And fortunately for you, Joe, you've never enjoyed drinking. I can remember all the times we'd go out with buddies and they, you want a beer? No, I can't stand it. And I was like, that is so awesome that you didn't fall into that like so many other people do. And so good for you. And there's times I sit there going, man, I wish I could have been Joe. There's other people that I wish I
Oh,
could be a social drinker and have a beer and call it good, and then not have a beer, be my wife and not have another drink for 6 months
yeah.
or a year. But I'm not. And I'm me. And there's a lot of people out there that are me's.
Yeah. And
Uh,
then,
you know,
and you're a beautiful person,
well, I
right?
don't know about that, Joe,
Yeah,
but
you are. You've helped so many people
I
throughout your life during all of
no.
this time. I just sit there and think about how many people and how many kids you served during that time in a positive way. And so I have three questions and we're done. First
Okay.
question is, what's your purpose in life?
My purpose now being retired, Joe, is to continue to try to help people,
Yeah.
whether through, I'm still coaching. This thing here, I'm hoping that I can reach somebody, one person. If I reach one person and got them not coming to me, but got them going somewhere, that's a wonderful thing. And then, I guess my last purpose, Joe, is going back to my dad, my family. That's the one group of people that will never leave you.
Yeah.
And friends come and go. I mean, fortunately for me, you and obviously a few others are going to be friends for life. But and I know, getting out of teaching and coaching, on a regular basis, some of those friends you had during that school life, you don't talk to them very much anymore. And so it's keeping those friendships, it's keeping that family, and doing what I can for those friendships and for my family, which is paramount now in my life, Joe.
What about
Um,
passion? What's
oh,
your passion around?
I'm passionate about life, Joe. I'm passionate
Yeah.
about people that I come in contact with. I mean, like I said, through coaching, I'm passionate about, now that I've had that relapse, and now I'm passionate about continuing to improve myself to where that doesn't happen again. And I can't tell you it's not going to happen again, Joe. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a day by day deal.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a day by day deal that it gets easier, but that's another thing I'm passionate about, that I don't slip again.
Yeah.
And I say right now, I don't think I will. I said that 25 years ago that I will never drink again, and I did, and I
Yeah.
slipped into it. And so, but life goes fast, Joe. I'm going to be 60 in December, and I just after that happened to that young person and me sitting on the sidelines, I thought, gosh darn it, gosh darn it, to have a young person like that. And there's a lot of them that, and my son, what he does for a living,
No, he's
and
amazing. Preston's been on my podcast.
you know,
It was an amazing podcast, by the way. You got to listen to that, Preston
oh,
Adams.
I have. And
And and then so your purpose and your passion kind of equal each other. And what I tell people is just your perspective is what holds it together. It's the glue. So many things come at you that try to take you out of your perspective in life. which then takes you out of your purpose and so forth. What is your perspective that holds all this together?
I always go back to my parents, to my dad, and some of the things that he always said to me, and it's just the life's short. I think that's a great perspective to have, and to live each day to the fullest. I don't know about you, Joe, but I think you will agree with me that when you're teaching and coaching, there is such a plan you have to follow, not only with the teaching aspect, what am I doing today in my business class, but now I'm getting ready for a Friday night football game, or, a game in baseball against Mountain Vista, what my practice plan, all of that stuff. And so your life is dictated by a plan. And what I've tried to do, and I'm getting better. I'm getting better. Is I've tried to slow my life down to, what do I have to do today? Well, today I got to meet with my best buddy Joe White and have an opportunity to share some things, and I'm trying to narrow it down day by day. And so life is my perspective, and what can I do? Because we're not getting any younger. My dad passed away at 73. That's 13 years from now.
Yeah.
And I want to have an impact on, if it's 13 more years, 10 more years, 20 more years, whatever it is, I want to make sure that I impact my family, my friends, and anybody else that I could potentially help. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, this has been powerful. Like I said, it's kind of the first one of the People Progressing podcast where you get an addict on the, well, no, not necessarily that, but just laying it all out there, being completely vulnerable. What it's going to do for people, is amazing. And that's why we do this podcast. So Dean, thanks for being vulnerable. Thanks for
listening,
saying what you said, and
thanks for listening,
coming out with, all this and letting people understand that you're okay. If this is going on, you're okay. You're still a good person. You're still, it's just something that happens. And it's something that some of us have to deal with, and you can deal with it, and you can get the support you need, and you can get the help you need, and you're okay. So I just thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome, and we'll get it out there, and hopefully a lot of people listen, and we'll see what happens. But nothing will happen unless people like you come out and do what you did today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I really do, Joe. Thank you so much for allowing me to tell my story, and hopefully it can help somebody. So,
I thank you all for listening. Again, share this podcast, get on, subscribe, do whatever you need to do so we can keep growing it. It's been a little longer today, but that's okay. And I just hope that, like I tell everybody every week, just keep progressing in your life, and keep learning, growing, and progressing. And we'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much.